honorable guests, esteemed panelists, and young student participants. On behalf of Center for Policy Dialogue, CPD, I would like to extend a warm and cordial welcome to the inaugural session of the 14th South Asian Economic Summit, SAES 14. The 14th South Asian Economic Summit is being organized by CPD Bangladesh along with its co-organizers IPS Sri Lanka, RIS India, Saudi Nepal, and SDPI Pakistan. I would now like to welcome our distinguished guests, Chief Guest Dr. Shirin Sharmin Chaudhuri, MP, Honorable Speaker, Bangladesh Parliament. Special Guest Mr. M.A. Mannan, MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Planning, Government of Bangladesh. Our distinguished speakers, Dr. P. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Ishrat Hussain, former Governor, State Bank of Pakistan, and former advisor to the Prime Minister on institutional reforms and austerity. Dr. Yuba Raj Khatiwara, former Finance Minister and former Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank. Our co-organizers, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General, RIS India. Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, Executive Director, SDPI Pakistan. Dr. Paris Karel, Executive Director, Saudi Nepal. Dr. Dushni Virakun, Executive Director, IPS Sri Lanka. Chair of the session, Professor Rehman Soban, Founding Chairman, CPD Bangladesh. Dr. Famida Khatun, Executive Director, CPD Bangladesh. And I would like to request Dr. Famida Khatun to accompany the guests to the stage. The chief guest, Honorable Speaker, Dr. Shirin Sharmin Chaudhuri, MP, is expected to arrive shortly. Now, we will play the national anthem of Bangladesh, so I would kindly request everyone to stand up for the national anthem. Honorable guests, we will now begin the proceedings of SAES 14. I would first like to request Dr. Famida Khatun, Executive Director, Center for Policy Dialogue, for her welcome remarks.
Good morning. Honorable Special Guest, Mr. M.A. Mannan, MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Planning, Government of Bangladesh, distinguished speakers on the stage, Dr. P. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Yubaraj Khatiwara, former Finance Minister of Nepal and former Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, former Governor, State Bank of Pakistan, and former advisor to the Prime Minister on institutional reforms and austerity. Our fellow colleagues from the co-organizers of 14th South Asia Economic Summit, Dr. Dushni Uirakun, Executive Director, Institute of Policy Studies, Colombo, Sri Lanka, Dr. Paras Kharel, Executive Director, South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Sauti, Kathmandu, Dr. Abid Suleri, Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, SDPI, Islamabad, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, New Delhi, over 40 distinguished participants from South Asia, distinguished guests, excellencies, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the founding chairman of the Center for Policy Dialogue, Professor Rehman Sobhan, members, Board of Trustees of CPD, and all colleagues of CPD, I extend a warm welcome to all participants from home and abroad to the 14th South Asia Economic Summit. We are indeed honored to have the gracious presence of the Honorable Speaker, who is yet to arrive. Indeed, the Honorable Speaker of Bangladesh Parliament also joined as the chief guest at the closing session of the 9th South Asia Economic Summit in 2016. Honorable Minister for Planning also joined a plenary session of the 9th South Asia Economic Summit in 2016 as the guest of honor. Their participation both at the 9th and 14th South Asia Economic Summit is a sign of commitment of the government of Bangladesh for closer cooperation among South Asian countries. My special thanks to our foreign guests who have traveled to Bangladesh to attend the 14th South Asia Summit. I wish you a pleasant stay in Dhaka. Dear guests, the overarching theme of the 14th SAES is reframing South Asian regional cooperation in the new context, national and global dimensions. The reasons for choosing this theme are manifold. Let me very briefly mention some of those to give a context to the SAES. In recent times, factors related to internal political, economic, and institutional dynamics, as well as extra-regional, geopolitical, and geo-economic configurations have become more pronounced. Moreover, the global economic and political order and alliances in which cooperation in the South Asian region is to take place have been undergoing significant changes. South Asia as a region has enormous potentials and possibilities which may be harnessed through regional cooperation and deepened through economic integration. However, currently, like the rest of the world, the South Asian economies are battling to recover from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. The Ukraine war and subsequent global economic challenges are also having multidimensional impacts on South Asian economies. Some economies in the region are finding it difficult to maintain macroeconomic stability and sustain the economic growth momentum which was experienced in the recent past. Moreover, political polarization and revealed vulnerabilities have emerged as significant issues in some countries in South Asia. A few countries have gone under IMF program and resorted to high-level budgetary support from external sources. 3 South Asian countries, Bhutan will graduate on 13 December 2023, Bangladesh and Nepal will graduate in 2026 from the least developed country to developing country status. The prospect of smooth graduation of the South Asian LDCs has become more challenging in the new economic reality. In this context, cooperation among the countries in South Asian region is crucial. Indeed, we have observed that during the recent periods, particularly during the periods of crisis such as COVID-19 pandemic, South Asian countries had come together and cooperated among themselves, mostly on a bilateral basis in the areas of access to vaccines, financial support, and food supply. However, we also observe that regional cooperation in South Asia has stumbled over the years due to political tensions, historical animosity between countries, and ongoing political and territorial disputes. There prevails a trust deficit among countries in the region. Distinguished guests, of course, there have been some initiatives at bilateral and sub-regional levels. For example, cooperation in energy, trade, and multimodal transport connectivity produced some results. At the same time, a number of other initiatives, such as the Motor Vehicle Agreement, MVA, involving Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, which is also called BBIN, have stalled after some initial progress. Moreover, when we talk about cooperation, we have to now expand the horizon beyond the traditional regional cooperation issues such as trade, connectivity, water, and energy, and bring in a number of new areas on the table. New areas of cooperation may include the public health system, structured labor market policies, expansion and deepening of supply chains, and foreign direct investment. Issues such as collective bargaining in global climate negotiation and alliances for technology transfer in view of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which have a long-term implications for South Asian countries, have become more important. Challenges of strategic positioning of smaller South Asian countries in view of the changing economic and strategic alliances also demand urgent attention. In view of the emergent economic, political scenario, global circumstances, and the often uncertain domestic political settlements, the 14th South Asia Economic Summit will discuss the above-mentioned issues in detail. During the 3 plenary sessions and 9 parallel sessions of SAES, policymakers, scholars, representatives of the private sector, media, civil society organizations, and development partners will deliberate on these critical issues and offer practical and pragmatic solutions. We feel discussions during the 14th SAES will help us in charting a path forward with a focus on harnessing the region's potential, addressing challenges, and envisioning a more prosperous and integrated South Asia. I look forward to your active participation at various sessions of the 14th SAES during these 2 days. Before I conclude, I want to inform you that CPD is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. We are proud and humbled to have been able to continue our journey during the last 3 decades. CPD's journey over the last 3 decades has been both a challenging and a rewarding one. We have received moral support, good wishes, and enjoyed goodwill from our stakeholders, which include policymakers, politicians, non-government organizations, civil society organizations, grassroots and community level organizations, experts, private sector representatives, media, development partners, and many more. CPD will continue to strive in creating an intellectually vibrant, open and transparent society in the coming decades. We hope to have you on our side in the coming years. With this, I would like to end. Wish you a successful discussion during these 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khatun. Dear guests, I would now like to welcome Dr. Dushni Virakun, Executive Director of the Institute of Policy Studies, IPS Sri Lanka, to the podium for her brief remarks.
On behalf of the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka, let me extend my very warm congratulations to Dr. Famida Khatun, Executive Director, and her team at the Center for Policy Dialogue for successfully convening the 14th South Asia Economic Summit and bringing us all here together this morning for what promises to be a stimulating and interesting 2 days of discussions and debates. It also gives me great pleasure to congratulate the CPD team for their remarkable journey over the last 3 decades as they celebrate their 30th anniversary. CPD team has been led by its core team, guided and mentored over the years, Professor Rehman Soban, Dr. Deba Priya Bhattacharya, Professor Mustafiz Rahman, and Dr. Famida Khatun. The IPS has been privileged to have worked with the CPD team over those 30 years. We have not only worked together as colleagues professionally, but we have more importantly built strong networks, and we cherish the friendships that have developed over time. CPD has on many occasions extended its help and support to the Institute of Policy Studies, not least when we lost our executive director, Dr. Saman Kelegarma, very suddenly 6 years ago, who was also a pioneer in initiating the South Asia Economic Summit process. It's also very fitting, as Dr. Famida Khatun mentioned, that the CPD has focused on the new context of national and global dimensions as the focus of the 14th South Asia Economic Summit. Economic policy is being fundamentally changed around us today globally. We know that many advanced countries are aiming to cultivate strategically important sectors in semiconductors, renewable energy, and advance their technologies in artificial intelligence, etc. A lot of money is being thrown into these initiatives under various industrial policy platforms. Elsewhere in the world, import restrictions and export bans are being imposed. FDI flows are being channeled to countries that are considered to be friendly to those countries that are big players, and all of these, as was very rightly mentioned, are a part of the big power competitions that's playing out and which will likely intensify in the coming years. So South Asian countries will have to grapple with these challenges as countries individually and collectively as a region, and it is, I think, very fitting that the SAES provides a platform for us all to come together, learn from each other's experiences, and perhaps collectively come to put forward our own policy responses and measures to address these challenges. The IPS is proud to be a part of the SAES initiative. We have networked and built relationships with CPD and our other partner institutes, SOTI, Nepal, RIS, India, and SDPI, Pakistan. Sri Lanka has also been at the receiving end of many hands of friendship that has been extended to us during our own economic struggles over the last 2 years. Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, our central bank governor, will attest to that, and we are very pleased today to be here and to be a part of these discussions in the coming 2 days. Once again, I conclude by thanking the CPD for hosting this SAES 14 and providing this very important platform at this critical juncture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Veerakun. I would now like to welcome Dr. Paris Karel to the podium for his brief statements. Dr. Karel is Executive Director of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Saudi, Nepal.
Namaste. The chair of this session, Professor Rehman Shoban, founding chairman of CPD, and an eminent champion of regional cooperation in South Asia, distinguished speakers, the special guest, chief guest, fellow co-organizers, and Dr. Famida Khatun, Executive Director, CPD, the lead organizer, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be back in Bangladesh as a co-organizer of SAES, the South Asia Economic Summit, in its 14th edition. But for the unavoidable disruption caused by COVID, SAES has served, in my view, as a consistently reliable forum for meaningful discussions of interest to the development aspirations of a region that is still basically a poor region, although with a vast potential, bringing together the private sector, policymakers, lawmakers, politicians, researchers, academics, civil society of the region. It is an inclusive South Asian forum where best attempts are made to ensure the contribution of representatives of all countries in the region. And when I'm on Bangladeshi soil and speaking in a civil society-led premier platform on South Asian regional cooperation, it would be remiss of me not to note the seminal role played by Bangladesh in coordination with Nepal to create an official forum for regional cooperation about 4 decades ago, which at that time, lest we forget, was a watershed moment. And the inception of SAES in 2008 was partly to complement the official process. After all, economic integration in South Asia, SAFTA and beyond, was the overarching theme of the first SAES in Colombo, when hopes ran high about SAFTA's potential to advance regional integration, because SAFTA had just come into force in 2006. SAES has evolved over the years. The themes and issues covered and the focus have kept pace with new developments, but importantly, without losing sight of the overriding goal, identifying constructive themes for regional cooperation. And besides, it is as much about understanding each other and sharing our knowledge as the publications that have emerged from SAES attest to. It is a testimony to SAES being very cognizant of new developments and changing contexts that this year, under CPD's leadership, the summit seeks to generate ideas for reframing, or shall I say, re-understanding South Asian regional cooperation at a time when notably geopolitical contests, primarily between countries outside the region, but also between countries in the region and those in the immediate neighborhood, are potentially pulling South Asian countries in different directions, even as they grapple with their own economic and political challenges. If in the past, bilateral tensions among South Asian countries had to be always factored in when discussing prospects of regional cooperation, now an additional factor has to be taken into account: the spillovers of shifting global geopolitical moods and alignments onto South Asia. And at the program schedule of this summit shows, traditional yet important issues such as cross-border trade, FDI, value chains, and logistics, climate change are to be discussed in the parallel sessions, but they are complemented by an explicit search for new avenues and ideas of cooperation and an understanding of challenges in the plenary sessions. So I wish us all success in this long overdue search. And Saudi is very much proud to be part of this initiative. Thank you once again, CPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karel. Let me now invite Dr. Abid Kayum Suleri, who is the Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, SDPI, Pakistan, to the podium to share his statements.
Good morning, Assalamu alaikum, namaste to all participants here. worthy excellencies on head table, distinguished guests. First of all, I'll take this opportunity to congratulate CPD for completing a very successful 30 years, and credit goes to Professor Rahman Subhan for founding such a dynamic organization, but then also to all the members of Board of Trustees, past and present Executive Director and team of CPD with whom STPI has been working during last 31 years. It's also a pleasure to be here at 14th South Asia Economic Summit. Some of the founders of this initiative, they're sitting there around round tables, but this initiative, it continued. And I call it as a wedding of cousin's son or sister, where you can meet all the uncles and aunts and siblings and brothers and nephews and nieces and a whole extended family under one roof. And this is extremely important. And you could see this morning the 40 delegates, when they were interacting with each other, it was just like get together of extended family. But ladies and gentlemen, let me remind that 2 decades ago, when this whole initiative it started, the purpose was to think of economic integration, purpose was to think of regional economic cooperation. But as earlier speakers, they have rightly mentioned, the CCC crisis, COVID, conflict, and climate change, it has led us to rethink the purpose why we are sitting here and how we can actually take it forward. Alhamdulillah, we are out of COVID, but this any next pandemic, the threat is still looming, and we are being warned of any new pandemic. Conflicts, we thought that economic interdependence would ward off conflicts, but Russia-Ukraine conflict, it reminds us that despite European and Russian economic interdependence, the peace and stability, it doesn't only depend on economy. We have to think beyond that. And we also have realized that this conflict in Middle East, conflict in Eurasia, it is affecting our food supplies, it is affecting our energy, it is affecting our economies, it is affecting our day-to-day lives. So we have to think beyond just economic integration. And then the final, climate change. And talking of climate change, let me avail this opportunity to offer my deepest condolences on the sad passing away of Professor Salimul Haq, OBE, who was a stalwart of climate justice from Bangladesh. May his soul rest in peace. So climate change is a manifestation, South Asia is a manifestation of how climate change can affect us. Today, while we are talking, Lahore and Delhi, they are equally merged under thick smog. Air quality has simply become unbreathable. Rains, and we receive hundreds of millimeters of rain over a few days. Heat waves, they are a common phenomenon, and it is affecting, as I said, our food security, it is affecting our energy security, it is leading to an unprecedented inflation, it is causing governments to rethink of their budgets, especially on health and on social protection. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the type of things that we'll be discussing in this 14th South Asia Economic Summit. STPI has always pleased to be part of this initiative, and we are here to get educated from each other with a new resolve that time for action is now, and the changing not only regional but also the global dynamics of geopolitical, geoeconomic, and some of the geophysical realities, they are forcing us to rethink of the common cause, why we should be together. And I think the common cause for me is expediting our work on Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. We know we only have 7 years left, but these challenges, they have made it more important that it is to ward off our existential threat. So I'll conclude that on the first SAES, we were thinking of common prosperity. Today, we have to think of our existence. If we don't get together and if we don't tackle these common challenges facing South Asia and humanity together, that may lead to an existential crisis. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of this galaxy and this eminent gathering.
Thank you, Dr. Saleri. Now, I would kindly request Professor Sachin Chaturvedi to the podium to share his brief statements. Professor Chaturvedi is the Director General of Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, India.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to congratulate CPD, Dr. Famida, for her leadership and for this summit that is being hosted by CPD to celebrate the 30th anniversary of this great institute that everyone recognized the role that Professor Rahman Subhan has played in terms of shaping, initiating. But I think the trinity of CPD, all the three are here, and I very much acknowledge Debuda, my very dear brother, Professor Mustafizur Rahman, and this trinity that has contributed not only shaping a very important research institution for Bangladesh, but I think for South Asia. They have played an extremely important role in providing leadership for regional integration in South Asia. SAES, if you recall, was one of their most important initiatives, I would say, that shaped the way we look at SAARC, the way we look at BIMSTEC, and also the need for having regional integration and continuing the idea of South Asia Economic Summit. Dr. Nagesh is here, who also shaped it from India. Professor Muchkund Dubey, Arjun Sen Gupta, Deepak Nair, they all have contributed in terms of creating what my very dear friend Abid was mentioning in terms of regional integration with emotional connect. The family inference that he was drawing out of it is very much committed to that idea of South Asia economic integration. Dushni also referred to it, Paras referred to it. So I think that way the academic community has been far ahead of the political process, the regional institutional frameworks that have shaped. I acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Bhattarai, Dr. Ashad Hussain, Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Dr. Veerasinghe. I also acknowledge presence of Professor Raunak Jahan, our very dear friend, the director who has from NCAR, who shaped the regional quantitative assessments for macroeconomy, Dr. Shekhar Shah, and all other friends here who have been contributing. I just have one point to make since we have been given only 3 to 4 minutes. First and foremost, I want to just make in terms of our idea of growth that is happening in South Asia. And I think the preliminary estimates that are there for a larger paper that RIS is going to produce is in terms of resilience that we are seeing in the South Asian economy. And that, I think, is important for us to realize the robustness that we see in the economic performance is something which should reassure us, which should give us hope for the region and the potential for our economic integration. We compared time frames for 2002 to 2007, because if in 8 we see the recession coming in, you find that that was the beginning of this century was a point when there was buoyancy in the global economy, and you find South Asia in rhythm with that buoyancy that was there. In fact, 2008 to 2016, the point where global economy was under recession, you still find that buoyancy continuing in South Asia. And 2016 onwards, there was a dip in the global economy. South Asia also dipped, but then we have bounced back. We have gone ahead and have contributed in terms of how we are looking at. In fact, last 2 decades economic growth, if you see in South Asia at CAGR, it is 6%. Which is no less a mean achievement that we can think of. And if you see the share of South Asia in the gross world production, you find that the share in 2002, which was only at 2.4%, has gone to 3.1% in 2009 and to 4.2% in 2022. So South Asia's economic contribution in the global economy is huge. If you see the gross capital formation as percentage share of GDP, that has also gone up. In 2000, it was 24.5%, which became 35.5% in 2010, and with some dip to 30% in 2022. The gross capital formation and gross fixed capital formation, the gap has reduced. The gross capital formation stands at $1,294 billion, and the gross fixed capital formation stands at 1,215.6. So this really shows that the capital investment that is happening is largely contributing to economic growth. You also find domestic savings, though in India we have now huge debate on the decline, but if you see the average for the region, the gross domestic savings as percentage of GDP, in 2000 it was 22.6%, which became 30% in 2010 and 29% in 2022. The growth financing is happening with the FDI, which has expanded. In 2000, it was 4.4%, which now $4.4 billion, which now stands at $54 billion for the region. Remittances are as always extremely high. I do not have to even bring in the numbers, which now stand at $176 billion for the region. So this is something which is extremely important. And what is the impact of these macro numbers that I'm talking of? If you see per capita income, that has risen by almost 5 times for the region. And as Famida very rightly pointed out, LDCs would be graduating from the region and going to contribute much larger. The recent IMF study very clearly shows that Asia would contribute to 49% of the global growth, and South Asian region would contribute 26% to this. So this kind of traction that we are talking of, the global share in population stands at 24%, and trade is the one which is driving this growth. If you see regional GDP and trade share, that was 28.8% in 2000. 2021, it became 42%. And the total trade stands at $2 trillion. This is something which is important in terms of recognizing the potential of South Asia. And this is also important in terms of world's contribution through ODA, the official development assistance, which now stands to $93.49 billion. And this is largely coming in from our own faith in the region. If you see the trade which is emerging in cross-border power distribution, sometimes we are extraordinarily critical of ourselves, and we do not realize what is happening at the global level. If you see the trend which is there for cross-border flow of electricity for ASEAN, it is 7 gigawatt. For GCC countries, it stands at 3.8 gigawatt. And can you imagine for South Asia? It is 18 gigawatts. So this is something which we do not realize, and as a result, the point that I want to make, and I said I would make only one point, and my only one point is in terms of excessive criticism of our own region. And we do not realize, we do not appreciate all the good things that I have listed. And as a result, we draw out a very negative, very pessimistic, and very rejecting ourselves. I think the trinity that I referred to in the beginning from CPD has been contributing in terms of how we take a better view of regional integration and our own contribution at the regional level. And I think I would stop with that in terms of realizing the fact that regional integration, the calculations that happen to contribute low numbers, I think we require methodologies that can correct that. Bela Balasa's methodology cannot be the sole methodology for us to calculate, and I think that's the task before the academics to take that forward. But the narrative that is important in terms of how we bring in the dimensions that are important for regional cooperation, for regional re-strengthening of our commitment, and also if we compare ourselves with ASEAN, despite of the fact that ASEAN region had armed conflicts in the region, all countries collectively talk about ASEAN centrality, ASEAN prosperity in the region. We need to bring that very much in a very profound manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chaturvedi. Dear guests, I would now like to extend a warm welcome and invite one of our distinguished speakers, Dr. Yuba Raj Khatiwara, former finance minister and former governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you. Chair of the program, Professor Shoban, Honorable Minister, distinguished panelists in the dais, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to be back in the civil society to speak about South Asian cooperation. I see so many my old friends around and working for the last almost 3 decades on regional cooperation, and the cooperation itself not heading satisfactorily toward any destination, implies that we have to invigorate ourselves, perhaps reinvigorate ourselves to see that the region delivers in a better way for a more peaceful and prosperous region. Here I do recall the latest SAARC summit held in Kathmandu in the year 2014, 18th one. The theme itself was a very integration of the region for peaceful and prosperity of the region. Anything held after that? The region prospered, of course, as my previous speaker also spoke about the region's growth of about 6% or more, so much of contribution to the global economy, so on and so forth. But the fundamental thing is that we are not a homogeneous slot in this region. We are heterogeneous countries. Our development discourses are different. The origin of development are different. The path of development are also different, and our growth rates are also different. Have we been able to share some of our prosperity to the neighboring countries by means of trade, investment, cooperation, and other kinds of cooperation? That is the fundamental thing we should be discussing in this forum. Oftentimes, the political differences have taken our economic imperatives of working closely. The food insecurity issue. We know South Asia is still the dent of poverty, the poverty issue. We are suffering from climate change as a homogeneous unit, South Asia. And many of the countries in South Asia are in the most vulnerable list of the countries being affected by climate change. We have energy insecurity. We are least connected by transportation and even communication in this 21st century of digitalization. So what are the way outs that we can even work together, setting aside the political differences for the economic imperative, simply because we cannot change our neighbor, and geography matters a lot for our regional cooperation. There was an earthquake in the far western side of Nepal this night, and we received a message from the Prime Minister of India to say condolence to some of the people who have been affected by the earthquake. and the tremor also was touching India. So there is a geographical linkage. You cannot simply avoid it. So having said so many things about the impasse on regional cooperation, as the previous speakers also told about, not to lose sight of the likely potential of cooperation and the compulsion under which we are working, I think we should agree on that and work further. And thank you, CPD, for taking up this topic at the moment when we have not even been able to host the 19th SAARC summit in time. So this should pave way for the next earliest SAARC summit and to discuss several other agendas. I used to work for SAARC maybe for the last 3 decades in different capacities, as a researcher, as a banker, as a central bank governor, as a planning commission vice chair, as a finance minister. When I was coordinating and chairing SAARC Finance Ministers Forum, and also having chaired this SAARC Development Funds Forum. What's happening now? The SDF is not functioning further. 20 projects, 150 million sort of loan. What is that in a region with so big of the GDP that we are talking about? Similarly, we have been talking about food insecurity. At the time of every crisis, South Asia is the most hit region for food insecurity. Also, that problem accentuated by climate change and not further cooperation being held in that area. So, what are we doing in food security area? We only put restriction on the movement of trade, food trade across the border, that's it. Have we been able to see how we can work to secure food collectively for the region when we have surplus in one country and deficit in the other one? So these are some of the, not economic, but simply an humanitarian issue that we must address being in the region. We have been talking about South Asian Economic Union. I think we do have a lot of discussion being held today and tomorrow on this union. Forget the union. It's a long way to go. Monetary union, long way to go. Customs union, long way to go. Single currency, even farther away to go. When I was a central bank, about 25 years ago, I hosted a study on the feasibility of having single currency in the region. Then I said, not feasible now. Start using local currency for local payment, for local trade. That is the most feasible way. Even that we haven't been doing now. We are trading in dollar, except for Nepal, Bhutan, and Nepal, India. We could have common currency, single currency in the longer distance, but we can use our currencies for our trade to begin with. And there are several technological advances in some of our countries. We have not been able to share those things among us. I think a country which is graduating at the moment, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Nepal, we need further support to keep our graduation to developing country for longer time. We need larger cooperation from our relatively developed neighboring countries to keep ourselves up from the LDC status. There we need further support. So how are we working in the area of science and technology and infrastructure and connectivity? That is important. Further, we do have development partners here. I can see ADB and World Bank working on South Asia on several connectivity projects. Have we been able to collectively have a discourse with them to see how we can collectively work with the multilateral agencies to garner more resources and mobilize the resources for better connectivity? Multilateral agencies are perhaps talking on a single country basis, trying to also collaborate with others. But what about our own initiative to bring more resources in South Asia for our common benefit? I think we should be discussing on those things also. The regional financial institutions, regional development mechanism. We don't have common view on BRI. We can settle down some of our issues. What are the differences in the region regarding Belt and Road Initiative? That could be one agenda we should be further discussing and see how we can benefit from that. Also the issue of the region's collaboration with the rest of the other regions, ASEAN included, and maybe other neighboring countries like China, where we do have a lot of relations regarding harnessing water resources. How are we approaching our neighboring countries, which are not member countries of SAARC, to harness water resources and perhaps also to collaborate on energy. So there are so many issues which are I think, very, very wisely put in the agenda of the discourse. I don't want to preempt all of them right now, but I look forward to have a very, very in-depth study and in-depth dialogue in those areas and guide the politicians as to what we can best do to bring together and narrow down the differences among the SAARC countries and foster our development for the peace and prosperity agenda that we all aspire. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khatiwara. I would now like to welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, former Governor, State Bank of Pakistan, and former advisor to the Prime Minister on institutional reforms and austerity, to share his remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Chairman, Rahman Saban Sahab, Honorable Minister, my distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank the CPD and the co-organizers of the summit to have given me this opportunity to come to this very beautiful country with which I have been fondly associated as a young civil servant. I started my career at SDO Patwakhali, and then I was Additional Deputy Commissioner Chittagong, and then Deputy Secretary Home. So my memories are very, very attractive for my own emotional adjustment, and I learned a lot from this country. And I've been coming here very regularly, and every time I come, I'm impressed with what is happening in Bangladesh. This morning, I wanted to share with you the findings of this book, which has just come out of the press, and this is the first presentation. It's called Development Pathways, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, 1947 to 2022. In my humble opinion, this is the first empirical and consistent analysis over a 75-year period of the relative progress and also the weaknesses of the three countries since they got independence. Because of the paucity of time, I will just concentrate on the main lessons of this study and divide this into what I call as the critical success factors, and also what are the pain points and the risks for the future. The first critical success factor is the form of the government, which is now being discussed very openly all over the world, whether it is democracy or autocracy or dictatorship or hybrid structures. The evidence is inconclusive. There is no association of any type with any type of regime. You had military governments and you had high growth, and you had military governments which had low growth. You had democracy which had high growths and democracies which are low growth. But in my humble opinion, democracy is the only way for sustained economic growth, because the representation of the people is very, very solid and is legitimize the decision-making process compared to one man's whims or an autocrat's own discretion. But what is important which comes out of this study is that political stability, continuity, consistency, and predictability of economic policies are the key success factors. If you have them, whatever the regime, the country will make headways. The second point I would like to emphasize is that by now there is a political consensus about the broad objectives and contents of economic policies. Economic policy choices and economic management has been very pragmatic in these three countries and not driven by rigid ideological predilections or doctrines. As circumstances, both external and domestic, change, there is been a willingness and capacity to change. And the period between 1950 to 1990 and 1990 to 2022 are two distinct periods, both for Bangladesh and India, but in also Pakistan in a very different sense. And the bank, this book actually describes what their distinguishing features are. Number 3, reliance on external assistance is undesirable. Only when your domestic savings are mobilized and investment is financed out of those savings, then you have a foundation of sustained long-term development. And both India and Bangladesh have come up with 30% of their savings rates, and they are no longer reliant, as they were in the first 40 years, on external assistance. The fourth finding is that the state market binary, which is so much talked about, is totally an outdated concept. We need both a strong, effective, and capable state and a well-functioning competitive market who can play the respective roles for which they are suited. A state has to ensure macroeconomic stabilization, provide infrastructure, invest in human resources, provide public goods and services, while public sector is engaged in production, exchange and distribution and trade of goods which are contestable. The other element which distinguishes Bangladesh is the very active participation of NGOs and civil society organizations, especially in human development and female participation rates and female empowerment. The fifth is that the participation in international trade, technology transfers, capital flows, and migration do benefit the domestic economies, and they are no longer considered as anathema. Export promotion, rather than tariff-protected import substitution, is the way forward, and both India, Pakistan, all the three countries have benefited whenever they had export promotion policies, and they have suffered when they were trying to protect the domestic industries. Number 6 is the investment in human capital. The financial inclusion, female empowerment are very major contributory factors for sustained and inclusive growth. You can have growth of all kinds, but if you're looking for sustained and inclusive growth, you need these factors, accompanied by social protection for the poor, and all the three countries have done very well as to protect and provide cash transfers to their poor. The seventh element, which is rather patchy and has been resisted by the politicians at the national and the state level, is the devolution, decentralization, and delegation of financial powers to local governments and communities. That not only is responsive to the needs of the communities which they know best, but also in mobilizing domestic resources, because people can see the results of their taxes and fees which are being paid, which are appropriated within the jurisdictions. And finally, it is quite clear that digitalization not only promotes efficiency, transparency, and citizens' access and convenience, but also prevents leakages and assistance to the poor. Since India moved to the digitalization of the social protection, the leakages, both in the public food distribution system, national employment schemes, and others, has really very much receded. What are the pain points and risks? And a lot of my preceding speakers have talked about it, so I will just give you bullet points. The first is that we are going to be facing climate change, environmental degradation, and pollution. And this is an area where regional cooperation beyond the political differences and tensions should be given the highest priority. We have to have an integrated basin management for our river systems. The second problem which is arising, except in Bangladesh, is about the inequalities in incomes, regions, and genders. India has now more income in the hands of the top 20% as compared to the bottom 50%. And the number of billionaires is expanding. The South is expanding, the West is expanding, but the North is not keeping up with that. The gender inequality is equally worrying for all the three countries. The third element, which really I found very disturbing, is that 80% of the employment is being created in informal sectors, which are low productivity. And economic growth only takes place when there is reallocation of resources from the low productivity sectors to the high productivity sectors. So while you have employment which is being created, it is mostly contractual, it is daily wage, and it is very fluid. And therefore, you're not investing in the human resources and the skills which are responsible for the productivity growth. The fourth element which I really worry about is the job creation for the youth in all the three countries. India has done extremely well as far as the IT industry is concerned, but it has only 5 million people employed in that industry, while there are 12 million people entering the labor force every year. How are we going to provide the jobs to this very youthful population, which is the cornerstone? Now, given the aging population in Japan, in Korea, and other advanced countries, there can be an arbitrage where you provide skill sets to your own youth in order to meet the demands of the other countries. But no government has really looked upon this in a systematic way. The fifth element is that Bangladesh has really excelled as far as the female labor force participation rate is concerned, which is twice as high as that of India and Pakistan. And this female empowerment has reduced regional gender disparities also, and domestic violence has also gone down. The family planning and the population growth has been controlled. The domestic environment for hygiene and the education of the children have been very, very dominant wherever you have the empowerment of the females. Therefore, the collateral benefits, not only economic and social, but of the entire intra-family distribution of power is extremely important for the female empowerment. The sixth is the intra-regional trade. This was a unified, well-connected market with a lot of similarities as far as the common law, the culture, as well as the traditions were concerned. East Asia, which is heterogeneous with all kinds of islands and not very much connected, has done 54% of interregional trade, and we are now confined only to 5% of that. And look at the potential, and I've been working for the last 20 years on regional trade for both for the Indian think tanks as well as for Atlantic Council in Washington. And my studies, along with others, show that the potential for increasing intra-regional trade would be a win-win situation for both the larger country, which is India, but also the smaller countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Pakistan. The seventh pain point is that we are not preparing ourselves for urbanization. We are having urban sprawls. We are having very little attention being given to the water supply, to the sewerage, to the solid waste disposal, and to the planning of rehabilitation. There is a mushroom growth coming up, and the poor are being neglected because the land prices are going high, and they are beyond the affordability of the poor, especially the migrants, to the big cities. And finally, I'm sorry to say, which is my pet subject, that Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh are still stuck in the colonial civil service structure and mindset, which is not responsive to the needs of the 21st century, where knowledge, competence, and expertise are required for governance, not that you appear at an exam at the age of 24 and your career is assured for the rest of your life. Whether you have improved yourself or not, that is the material. And this is something on the governance as well as institutions, which the three countries have failed to do that. And unless they restructure their governance and institutional structure, they will remain behind East Asia, which is progressing quite rapidly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. I would now like to cordially invite Dr. P. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and our distinguished speaker to present his remarks.
Good morning, honorable ministers, members of the head table, the heads of research institutions organizing this important forum, distinguished attendees, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank Dr. Famida and the organizers for inviting me to this important occasion. And also let me join other colleagues to congratulate CPD for his last 3 decades journey that they have contributed mainly with other collaborative institutions to make contributions on the economic integration and all the debates and work that they have done so far. I think first we need to I also join appreciating and recognizing the work and congratulate for their journey so far. And also, I'm speaking here, I think on the, interestingly, 2 other speakers are former central bank governors. So I'm the third here going to talk about central banking, not on the central banking, but third central banking governor. So it's quite interesting in this kind of forum. I think I have been benefiting, participating a couple of times with someone earlier in similar forums. And coming from the background, so compared to, I guess, other 2 central bankers, I'm a hardcore central banker, as a career central banker for almost more than 30 years, whereas I can understand others are much more diverse background that who can obviously much more knowledge, can speak with authority in the areas of economic integration. Whereas let me, although I'm a central banker, let me try to focus on the subject that today we are focusing on, the reaffirming South Asia regional cooperation in the new context, national and global dimensions. I know there are a lot of interest on Sri Lanka. Whenever I meet people here and anywhere else, the first question I'm getting is that how Sri Lanka is doing, during the crisis, after the crisis, what the status, way forward, what we have done, all these questions. I don't think I'm going to address all these things, despite a lot of interest. I think some other session, probably in the panel, if there are interest, we can talk about it. So I like to focus on what we are supposed to talk today, mainly on the regional cooperation. And in fact, it will be easier now. Earlier speakers laid foundation strongly and raised a lot of important points. Let me elaborate on those points and add my few thoughts in these areas. So first of all, let me touch on the global economic situation. The global economy, now we know all, has faced several challenges. Firstly, COVID-19, that took a substantial socio-economic toll, and then it's also created several new vulnerabilities in economies while also exposing several deep-rooted issues, as we are seeing from the experience even our economy in Sri Lanka. With the rapid development of vaccines and economies adjusting to the new normal of COVID-19, that we see much more regional integration when we face COVID-19, the global economy has seen a new turn of events caused by emergencies of geopolitical tensions, that's all we talk about, that are having sustained impact on commodity prices and with the possibility of negative impacts on commodity availability, and that will have impact on food security as well as. So on account of these developments, although global output growth is expected to continue slowing down, the South Asian region, as already elaborated, is expected to display some resilience, especially on account of exports and continued flow remittances. However, all in South Asian economies, projected growth may be teetering around the average seen prior to the pandemic, without reaching the same. Obviously, there are outliers like Sri Lanka. Due to the crisis has become an outlier in terms of growth performance as well as going forward that we have seen experience in Sri Lanka. This is primarily due to unwinding of the expansive monetary and fiscal loosening that was needed in the wake of the pandemic. The aspect that I want to draw your attention to, ladies and gentlemen, is the contrary to our optimism as individual economics as a region. We need to be wary of this modest growth pace as well as are striving to take our economies to the high income category within next few decades. As already talked about, everyone talking about South Asia as the engine of growth and about 5 to 6% at least within a generation. Hence, there is an urgent need to rethink areas of synergies and find means and ways of converging and reaching consensus so that the policymakers and policy practitioners, we can pave the way for prosperous economies and societies in the region going forward. Amid the global economic slowdown, the SAARC bloc will need to go back to the drawing board. I think there's a lot of discussion came up, and rapidly work out effective yet pragmatic strategies that can help our vulnerable region to weather this storm. Regionalism will be essential to sustain South Asia's dynamism. South Asia is a sub-region that is yet to fully exploit its interregional potential. Obviously, recognizing the heterogeneity as Governor Yuvraj mentioned, we also need to exploit our interregional potential. With one of the world's largest markets and a growing superpower in our neighborhood, that's mainly India is leading the growth, giving this impetus. Enhancing regional economic cooperation can not only ensure better growth prospects for our individual economies in the region, but can also enable the devising of effective responses to several long-standing development challenges that we all know we are facing. We are not this still region with a world largest the ratio of poverty. I also wish to acknowledge that it is not a simple block in that each of the member states, as already mentioned, have diverse characteristics and possesses somewhat different views and status in relation to infrastructure, population, demography, technological development, and socially in relation to political influence and military power. We have very diverse and heterogeneity there. It may be appropriate to say that South Asia comprises several nations, but it is not small. After all, today, South Asia region is home to 2 billion inhabitants, which is 25% of the global population, as you all know. Despite these differences, let us take a moment to go back to our roots, which are intertwined in terms of culture, ethnicity, and religion. There are several cross-border similarities. This is a unique integration that we see even in the past. There are several cross-border similarities in traditions, languages, and customs. Hence, it may be appropriate to go to next mile and also adopt South Asian identity. On the basis of such common identity, deriving synergies in the area of interregional trade, investment flows, transport and connectivity, financial integration, and even across development issues of food security and climate change and mitigation, and can enable the overall upliftment of our member nations as a first round effect, while also improving the region's preparedness to participate in and benefit from broader regionalism in the Asia-Pacific region. So we have to link with the Asia-Pacific region as well. So let me elaborate in those areas that I'm going to touch on briefly. First, interregional trade. As done by several researchers, and also there's a lot of ideas expressed here, academics and policymakers in the past will need to take the well-trodden path and dedicate a few minutes to discuss issues pertaining to interregional trade and investments that are potentially the lowest hanging fruit in our bloc. That I hope that there will be discussion going forward in this seminar. Interregional trade among SAARC nations is crucial for promoting economic growth and reducing poverty in the region. However, trade within SAARC has historically, we all know, been limited due to various factors, including political tensions, restrictive tariffs and duties, import restraints, protracted custom requirements, and excessive documentation. This is a uniqueness of in our region when we look at all these areas. When you look at Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka's exports to SAARC region accounted only for nearly 10% of total Sri Lankan exports, while import accounted for nearly 29%, mainly from India, due to that mainly coming from India. Interregional trade among SAARC countries was about $40 billion in each direction in 2022, which has seen a steady growth over the years compared to $6 billion in 2023. We have seen some improvements over a period of time. Imports among SAARC countries were about 4% of the total imports from the world by SAARC countries, while exports among SAARC countries were about 7% of the total exports to the world by SAARC countries. So, yeah, it's still a very low share, which indicates that despite steady growth in regional trade, still limited compared to the total trade of the region. Needless to say, over time, there have been several measures taken to improve interregional trade too. At Nepal government minister already mentioned several arrangements. For example, like SAARC Regional Trade Agreement SAPTA from 1995, South Asian Free Trade Area SAFTA since 2006. These agreements could have been partially responsible for the steady growth in the regional exports, although there are obstacles to further improving trade, as I mentioned already. In addition to the above, Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement, APTA, and Global System of Trade Preference, GSTP, that we have access for many countries in the region, also covers some of the SAARC countries. However, overall export potential of the region is straddled by low product coverage, similarity of product baskets, and rigid non-tariff measures. Hence, it is essential to continue efforts to strengthen trade ties with regional peers to effectively execute existing regional agreements, while essentially exploring possible entry into new and broad regional partnerships, such as Regional Countries for Economic Partnership called RCEP. So this way, I think in Sri Lanka we have taken several initiatives to link up with RCEP, so that there's some linkage between Asia-Pacific ASEAN countries and the South Asian bloc. Several other agreements I already mentioned, such as Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral this BIMSTEC that Sri Lanka shared last year, and Indian Ocean Rim Association we are sharing now, IORA, are in operation to improve regional economic partnership, while SAARC agreement on trade in services, what they call SAES, is being negotiated to cover trade in service sector in the region. But I have not seen a significant progress so far, but hopefully that we can make progress in these initiatives. Another welcome initiative has been the recent scheme by India to trade in Indian rupees. So, going to talk about the monetary union, currency union, the bloc similar to EU. I think we are far away from that kind of economic union and integration. But a good step first is to promote this trade in INR, because India has interest in making Indian rupee as a kind of a global currency. At the beginning, I think the Indian rupee will have to be currency which to facilitate trading at least within the region. That's a good initiative. We are also supporting from our side in Sri Lanka. We have designated INR as a distinct currency. I know in Nepal and Bhutan already doing that, and this expansion is expected to create more avenues for trade and trade integration within the region by reducing exposure on US dollar and other reserve currency. That's obviously one thing when Indian INR is gradually become a global currency that could attract for trade and other transactions. And that will also, other area that we need to promote is the payment and settlement using technology and linking up payment and settlements in INR as a currency in the region. I don't think, in my view, this common currency is something that I don't think we have potential given different heterogeneous status of macroeconomic policies. That is a difficult, different macroeconomic challenges countries are facing. Common currency may be too early, but common currency for trading like INR is a possibility to start with. It may also be appropriate to assess the possibility to expand such initiatives to the South Asian region as a whole, to expand trade settlements, as I said, it's a trade and services settlements by South Asian countries in local currencies. That is to mainly, I think, INR and local currencies facilitating trade. I believe a collaborative study in this regard is to be initiated shortly as part of research collaboration under what we call SAC Finance, a central banking network in the SAC region, as I already mentioned by former Governor Nepal. And I sincerely hope that there will be some positive and material findings that can help pave way for such integration of this after this study. Amid initiatives to enter into new trade agreements, I believe the prudent way forward is to partake in global village by identifying means of integration with global regional value chains and diversification of exported goods while broadening the export market in general. Nevertheless, rather than relying too much on duty concessions, export promotion policies need to focus on exporting improved quality goods with high value addition at low cost of production achieved through research and development-led innovation over the medium to long term. These are the areas I think we need a lot more research. And this kind of the institution can support this kind of research and innovations. The similarity of export product basket in the region, that's one of the reasons we don't have interregional trade, could help improve production networks, so that we can take the advantage of that thing to improve production networks in the region as well. Thereby regional economies could benefit through cooperation than competition. In order to succeed in this, it is required to reduce overall tariff and non-tariff barriers in the region in general. That's one of the obstacles for this supply chain and cooperation in this regard. The benefits of such cooperation could extend towards service exports as well, which for most countries is an untapped opportunity. For example, the regional countries could benefit from cooperation in tourism, IT BPO, transport, health, education, and professional service sectors if sectors are much more open. Let me just share a few ideas on the transport and the connectivity. South Asian region is strategically located between Europe and Southeast Asia. Asia itself is the world's leading maritime cargo handling center in 2021, accounting for 42% of exports and 64% of imports, and around 40% of total containerized trade was on the main east-west route. That's a big opportunity here. Despite our strategic location, only 3 of our region ports, 2 of which are in India and Colombo port, are in the top 50 container ports. Port performance is not only about enhancing regional connectivity, but also has direct implications on the competitiveness of our region's exports, and thereby our ability to further penetrate to the EU and fast-growing ASEAN market. With the growing traction for a global village, the concept that I am promoting here, the time is opportune for us to consider means in which we can improve cross-border connectivity, as already talked about, while also ensuring our sovereignty and security. So this is a geopolitical issue. Although several studies have been made in relation to transport infrastructure and services within individual member nations, cross-border transport facilitation is almost non-existent within the region. Enhanced interregional connectivity can open up myriad of opportunities to establish regional production networks and develop value chains that enable the exploitation of individual countries' abilities to create highly competitive final products. I think this connectivity is very important. This can help create regional synergies that will enhance access to global markets through improved productive capacity. This is what we are seeing mainly in the ASEAN. In turn, this can be expected to translate into balanced regional development, linking inland manufacturing and production centers that are scattered across the region can also be a game changer in fostering interregional trade in supply chains. Then let me focus on the energy, which is also another new area that's emerging as for regional integration. This area that can immensely benefit all nations is in relation to the energy sector. While the SAARC region had been grappling with energy constraint on account of insufficient energy resource endowments, bottlenecks in domestic energy infrastructure, a lack of investment mobilization in the energy sector, the region is now presented with new challenges in light of the need to transition away from fossil fuels in line with Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030. The studies show that in all South Asian countries except India, pollution-intensive jobs far exceed green jobs and account for 6 to 11% of all jobs. Such jobs are also concentrated among low-skilled and informal workers. Regional cooperation in areas of education, training, and even market access can help mitigate these inevitable losses by improving labor mobility to green sectors. This also, I think, we have very close labor markets, especially in the areas that we need integration. On the other hand, regional cooperation can also help facilitate investment and technical assistance flows that can enable the smooth transition to renewables, as seen as in the experience of Sri Lanka, which is benefiting from India's investment and expertise in the renewable energy area. There's plenty of potential for cooperation also in relation to energy resource exploration and management. While there have been strides in energy trade projects, these have usually been between a few selected countries and have not addressed the region as a whole. With our economies being vulnerable to the spillover effects of global energy price shocks that we're already experiencing with the Ukraine-Russia war and also in the Middle East situation, this may be an opportune moment to assess how to develop a sub-regional grid building and on existing interconnections, while also creating a formal mechanism to share good practices in enhancing energy efficiency and renewable technologies. The another area is ICT. I think is an area that we can benefit a lot in the region. In the last decade, our sub-region has made significant progress in the information and communication technology, ICT, positioning itself as a major production hub and highly sought after export of IT and IT-enabled services. COVID-19, of course, helped to catalyze significant portion of the recent transformation into this ICT area. Even then, progress across the region is uneven, and there are growing disparities in access to technology, even within countries. Just forget about the interregional disparities. As in the case of energy, investing in cross-border IT and telecommunication infrastructure to improve the overall infrastructure base in the region is becoming increasingly important, especially considering its potential to build and protect existing human capital, create jobs and innovation, and empower human capital to enable economies to sustain growth and meet SDG targets in modern economy. Facilitating cooperation in this area is imperative to improve the resilience of the region, especially in the face of new shocks such as climate disasters, pandemics, and even technology-induced disruption in employment. In fact, India can take the lead in this cooperation. And other area is a financial cooperation. This we all are familiar as central bankers. From a macroeconomic perspective, in recent times, Sri Lanka obviously has immensely benefited from its SAARC peers with our financial cooperation through SAARC Finance, through short-term liquidity support we got from India, we got from Bangladesh. That was a great support that's an example of how the regional cooperation and financial cooperation can benefit, especially at difficult times, and it can also benefit at normal times. The assistance that was extended in the wake of crisis to Sri Lanka provided immense relief in the midst of socio-economic program that Sri Lanka was in last year. The type of financial cooperation is not only that area, but we can expand. I'm sure Sachin was talking about yesterday, India initiative to expand this area beyond certain areas like what we are already having. Type of financial cooperation among us can not only be a short-term buffer, not only a liquidity support, but it can also be a more long-term nature in the form of investment flows towards infrastructure gaps and even building of overall productive capacities. Several commendable initiatives are already in place, such as I said, SAARC Finance and the SAARC Public Debt Managers Forum, which offers platforms for discussions in relation to financial flows and to facilitate overall conclusions in policy making. And this is something related to this also, the payment and settlement area that we can benefit a lot in terms of integrating the payment settlement in local currency as well as INR. So then other area I would like to just focus on social vulnerabilities. South Asia is a hotspot for natural calamities, and therefore its population of 2 billion is becoming increasingly vulnerable. Already talk about this area to the impacts of climate change, food insecurity, and infrastructure devastation. Given such common risks and vulnerabilities across the region, collaboration in this regard is the only means of ensuring sustainable growth amid these natural shocks. There's a collective need to improve agriculture productivity. This is one important area. Agriculture is a key base for the productivity. through sustainable agriculture practices. While certain member countries have made strong achievements in this regard, others continue to lag. Also, considering the natural ecological systems go beyond our individual boundaries, pooling technology and information in a manner that focuses on sustainable management of natural resources for food security and agriculture productivity is imperative. That's an important area. Given greater regional cooperation can help minimize food price volatility and focus production systems to fill the lacuna that lies in demand and supply. In this regard, strengthening of existing regional institutions such as the SAES Seed Bank and the SAES Food Bank may be timely. Collaboration in relation to good agriculture practices, effective land use, crop productivity, food production, seed production, livestock rearing, and disease management can help spur innovations and research in a timely and effective manner to improve agriculture productivity. The recent devastating floods in the region, already mentioned, talk about that, are a reminder of our region's vulnerability to climate change. For many of our individual economies, earmarking funds for climate change amid our macroeconomic vulnerabilities can be a daunting and challenging task. You all know the funding gaps and lack of available sufficient funding for the climate issues. Mainstream disaster risk reduction through enhanced regional cooperation can help compensate these financing gaps. Network of multi-hazard early warning systems established through the pooling of resources, expertise, knowledge, and information can help address this key shared vulnerability while also enabling channeling of knowledge about building resilient cities. Then just finally, let me focus on the reframing relation with the global economy. It's no point only talking about regional integration. We need to link up the global economy, despite all the geopolitical issues, and that's a reality, but still we need to find a way to integrate our region in the global economy. While I had been constantly underscoring the need for regional cooperation across South Asian region, this is important that how we can integrate beyond the region. The trade barriers that are currently in place across each of our economies are also affecting our integration with the global economy. There has been a lot of focus among academia, researchers, and policymakers about value chain activity gravitating towards India. I have seen that this debate going along, they're moving production bases out of China. This could catalyze the development of regional value chains and services trade involving the rest of South Asia. Accordingly, research highlights that several national and regional policies are required to pave the way for regional trade integration between South Asia and the rest of Asia. There's plenty of scope to streamline and slowly reduce trade barriers that will enable integration with our immediate neighbors and thereby evolving into linkages with the global economy. This intention is to link our region into the global economy. Opening of trade will come with its own set of novel challenges, which requires that we will also need to negotiate technical assistance and adjusting financing to smoothen the volatilities that may arise from these developments, especially among the small economies of our region. So there's a concern is that while opening up, there could be impact in certain sectors, so that we have to look after those issues as well while opening and integrating with the other part of the world. From a broader perspective, increased cooperation, integration, and alignment with the region can also help us to collectively benefit from interlinkages in other major regional blocs such as ASEAN, among others. For the long run, emergence as a united sub-region can also enable tapping into multilateral funding and technical assistance as collaborative efforts, which collectively benefit the region, translates into efficacious fund utilization that is often required by donors. So in conclusion, I take a lot of time. In conclusion, as been discussed over the past 3 decades and also discussed here in the morning, since the establishment of SAARC, the South Asian region has consistently lacked other sub-regions and other regional blocs due to lack of integration. That's a reality. However, the region possesses immense potential in terms of its large population, rich resource endowment, geographical location, even common cultural heritage and historical roots. Going forward, to tackle the challenges and presented by the volatile global environment and other novel and unique challenges, such as climate change, pandemics, and even technological disruption, forging linkages and identify synergies amid the several differences even geopolitical differences, it's imperative and unavoidable to create sustainable growth for each of our economies and for the region to emerge as a growth driver. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Veerasinghe. Dear guests, with great prestige and honor, I would like to welcome the Honorable Minister, Mr. M.A. Mannan MP, Ministry of Planning, Government of Bangladesh, who has kindly agreed to be the special guest today in this inaugural session.
Good morning and Shubha Shakal. I'll begin by thanking organizers of this very important regional event this morning in Dhaka. Particularly, my appreciation and thanks for Professor Rahman Subhan and his, I know, great organization, CPD, in doing noticeable, recognizable, visible work is a very important area of knowledge and discipline. On a personal note, I would also like to remind Professor Saban, who is now celebrating his 30th year in CPD. In 1993, when I was a functionary in the government, Professor Rahman Saban used to carry sheets of papers to my office to be processed and licensed to operate as a think tank. So it's my pleasure once again, Professor Saban, you are in good health, still at the helm of affairs, 30 years, I hope you make it to 50 and beyond. Good luck to you. Also another small note for Professor Dr. Ishrat, who mentioned his days in Chittagong as additional deputy commissioner. The 60s maybe? 60s you mentioned? 60s? Which was the year, sir, you were in Chittagong? 60s, mid-60s. 58, 59. Oh, lovely. So 30 years after that, I was a deputy commissioner in the same district where you were there. So this brings us together here again. Now, of course, I would like to welcome very distinguished guests who have participated, meanwhile, and spoken. I would like to name them all. Dr. Dushni Virakun of IPS Sri Lanka, Dr. Paras Kharel of Sochi, Nepal, Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri of SDPI, Pakistan, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi of RIS, India, and of course, Dr. Yuvaraj Khatiwada, Dr. Ishat Hussain, and Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe. All of you gentlemen are visiting our capital today and I think tomorrow also on this occasion. On behalf of the government of Bangladesh also, I would like to welcome you amongst us. Ladies and gentlemen, subject is wide-ranging. It is for me, reframing, they call it, reframing South Asian regional cooperation in the new global regional context. It's a huge, huge subject. Reframing means we would like to reframe. There was something before, and that is my favorite area. Our ancestors have been living, walking around, running around, moving, trading for thousands of years in this region prior to the arrival of the colonial masters from the north. And the roots of trade had been mentioned in ancient laws and myths and stories and books. The great Silk Route, the great route from then Indian subcontinent to the west, going to Egypt, to Lebanon, to the Romans and Greek areas. So this is not something which is very new for us. We have been trading for thousands of years. Unfortunately, this culture of living in freedom and working in freedom and moving around in our great homeland, which we now call South Asia, had been with us for thousands of years. Now we are broken into borders. We have border regimes to follow, passports and visas to fill up and to respect, and many other things. As a result, not only human, ordinary. Before I came here this morning, one of my organizations, BIDS, Bangladesh Institute for Development Studies, a think tank, a government-launched think tank, gave me a couple of very interesting figures. According to their findings, as of now, only 8% of the total global trade of South Asia is within themselves. Intra-trade within the member countries of South Asia. Only 8% of the global trade. It's a terrible, it's a very miserable figure, I would say. Earlier it was 100% when we were together, walking into each other's territories, each other's cultures. I'm just mentioning the new reality of the world. The borders, the fences, electrical wires, and so many things. Now, these are the issues that we have to settle before we go into the seeing that humans can come closer, trade, and live, and prosper. Unfortunately, that dream is still beyond our ken at this moment. But let me not be very pessimistic. We are making inroads following following independence for the British Raj in 1947 first, and for us in 1971. As an example again, same, our BIDs gave me another figure. In 1718, India was 12th among the 50 destinations that we traded from Bangladesh. 1718, just about 4 years back, 5 years back. Now they again gave me a figure for 21, 22. Now India has become 7th among the countries that where we trade. There's a jump of 5 from 12 to 7. I'm very glad about that. It can be 1. It can be more. There is no end to it. The bottom line is not today. Bottom line lies in the future. And future is unlimited. So my submission today is that gradually the culture of distrust, fear that was put into us by colonial masters, for whatever reason, we will not discuss it here now. It's our duty now. Duty in Colombo, duty in Islamabad, duty in Delhi, duty in Kathmandu, duty in Dhaka, and to Thimphu, and to Mali also, and to Afghanistan, to see that these barriers are removed. Barriers are gradually eased so that more trades can happen. We, from Bangladesh, by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, she has been highly proactive on the global stage, not only the global stage, in the regional stage also. First requirement of better trade, better movements, infrastructure. At this moment when I'm speaking here, she's opening up in about a couple of hours' time the route from Dhaka North to Dhaka South, metro rail. A journey of 7 to 8 hours today will be reduced to 31 minutes from this afternoon. It's a great leap forward. Great leap forward. Today we are able to travel from Dhaka to Calcutta by land route over Padma Bridge, which we built, in 4 hours, which was a journey of days earlier. Today, under her leadership, since she became Prime Minister second time in 2009, we are opening up all the broken, all the closed trade and human routes of the British time and the private times. Rail links, road links, which were cut following our independence in 1947, which were cut out following the war of 1965, under her dynamic leadership, her brave, bold step forward, we were able to restore all these routes. Agartala, you know, has been linked with COVID only yesterday, I think. More are being opened every day. Waterways, railways, roadways, historical routes, economically viable routes built over thousands of years of trading, which were cut and now being restored by Sheikh Hasina, and now being restored by our government. For what purpose? We want more trade, more movements, more getting together. That ultimately, we believe, will lead us to a better future. Not by distrust, not by suspicion, not by fears. Ladies and gentlemen, another thing I would like to mention here, since we are talking about reframing for economic matters, economic summit, another bold step of our government was opening border heart in Bengal means markets on our borders with India. Clear days every week when traders from both sides can move with their goods and trade in local currencies, in taka and rupee, and go back. That has been a great step forward. Thousands of people every day, every other day are trading in our borders. We would like to open more such border trade hearts so that trade is more eased, which leads to welfare for both countries. Ladies and gentlemen, apart from what I mentioned just now, there are other barriers also. Paper barriers. Barriers of visa regime. It takes days on. Passport regime. Years on. These will all have to be reduced. And then there are other barriers. Non-tariff barriers. Revenue matters come in. Customs. Non-tariff barriers. Cultural barriers. And sometimes some anti-dumping duties and other things also. These continuously should be dismantled. We'll have to dismantle if we really mean business, if we really mean welfare for the millions, now 1 billion, almost 1.5 billion, 1.7 billion, including all people who live in this territory. So continuous work for the leaders of all these 7, 8 countries to be getting together and dismantling the vestiges, colonial vestiges of the past for the welfare of our people. I must also mention that there have been efforts. SARC was one effort. BBIN, BIMSTEC, I can name more. They are born quickly, but they don't live, unfortunately. There must be good reasons for that. Your think tanks, scholars, practitioners, you would be able to find ways, find why these organizations which we launch with a lot of fanfare, with high hopes, don't take off. ASEAN has done fairly well, and of course, the European Union is the one great example. There are other efforts in other areas also. We can learn from them. So these 4 or 5 attempts that we made in this region, BBIN, BIMSTEC, SARC, SASEC, whatnot, all of these will have to be energized. It is in our hands, hands of my Prime Minister, hands of Prime Minister of Pakistan, Prime Minister of India, to see that these last remaining barriers left by the colonizers are removed for all times to come. We have a better life just beyond our borders. It's waiting out there. It's for us to take this in our hands. Not only in trade, in investment also. My organization, which gave me some information yesterday, we are very, very low. But at the same time, between us and India, trades have flourished. We must admit that. Investments are flowing in from India into Bangladesh. We don't look at it with suspicion. Trade is trade. Over the years, my friends from India, they know it now, most visitors to India are from Bangladesh. Number 1 country in the world, visitors who visit India is Bangladesh. Nagesh, you're here, you can. So what does it say? A lot of prospects for us. Thousands of Indian professionals work on their living in this country. Many from Pakistan also. great friends from Sri Lanka. Similarly, we have people, experts, semi-experts, skilled workers moving into other countries. So these will have to be encouraged, not by delivering speeches here, but by going back to the offices, digging out the old rusty papers and tearing them away, throw them away, left by the British, read by Pakistan days, left by others also. These, I'm not saying with a sense of hatred or anger, realities. These are not necessary, unless it is necessary for me to prosper and become big individually. It's a different thing altogether. I don't want to mention that. So what I was trying to say again and again, we in Bangladesh, our Prime Minister for the last 1.5 decades, 15 years now, we have moved areas, we have moved issues, we have removed a lot of barriers from our path. With Indians, we had the issue of enclaves. Many enclaves left by the British. When they left in a hurry, they left patches here and there on both sides of the borders. They could not clear it before they left. So all these miserable people, few million, were living in enclaves. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, now, although it was an agreement in the 50s probably, it is finally cleared. We have been able to settle these issues. We have been able to free up millions of people from their enforced bondage within their own borders. We have been able to settle up issue of the Bay of Bengal, where there are some sandbanks, deep or islands. We had problem with our great neighbor India to the west, another great neighbor to east, Myanmar. We are a very friendly people. We went to the court, international court of something like the law of the sea, something, and there the verdict was given. We accepted. Our two great neighbors, Myanmar and India, also accepted. That I'm saying to show that it is possible if we clear our mind and come and settle, talk, have dialogues, or go to the international courts wherever it is necessary, to the UN system. That is possible. I would like to mention that also. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are many ways that we can work now. I mentioned infrastructure, power. We in Bangladesh, we need much more power than we are producing now. We need power on the western side, which is economically makes sense to carry from the eastern Indian state or western territory. To the east also, we can carry power from Nepal, from Bhutan. We can have trade and power to the benefit of all our countries. And again, I must mention some years back, I can't give the date now, there was a treaty, there's an agreement between India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan for movement of traffic on the roads. That unfortunately has not been implemented as yet. Although we agreed to move into each other's territory free, in total freedom for trade and for visiting as tourists. Although 5-6 years the treaty or the agreement was signed, it has not been implemented. It's an example where other things, apart from trust, comes in between us. We in Bangladesh would like to see this moved. We are ready if our neighbors are ready. We value our neighbors highest in our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is based on the fact that we live among neighbors. The neighbors whom we address first, with whom we socialize first, mix first, talk first, then go beyond. That still remains the fundamental principle of Sheikh Hasina's foreign policy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can go on talking about more and more. I'm in politics now, so I'm used to talking a lot among you all scholars and economists and thinkers and think tanks. My appeal to you would be that you continue your good work that you are doing, like bringing out statistics, telling us to our face what we have done, what could have been done. That's very important. Tell the politicians, this is what you're doing now. You're doing trade worth X amount. If you did that, it could be X, Y amount. Tell us that, and we will learn from you. So such meetings from time to time. This is the 30th, this 30th? 30th, I think, or no? Yeah, 14th, I'm sorry. 14th South Asian Economic Summit. I hope it continues in the future, and we have it in other countries also of the region, and we would like to support all of you in your respective work in whatever way we can. Thanks once again for the generous and kind invitation to me, and good luck to everyone. Jai Bangla, Jai Bangla.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Dear distinguished guests, I would now like to invite Dr. Ishrat Hussain once again to present his recently published book for the first time titled Development Pathways, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, 1947 to 2022, which he has authored, to the special guest, Honorable Minister, and the founding chairman of CPD. Dear guest, please welcome our chief guest, Dr. Shirin Sharmin Chaudhary, MP, Honorable Speaker, Bangladesh Parliament. With the utmost honor and respect, I would now like to extend a warm welcome and invite our chief guest, Dr. Shirin Sharmin Chaudhary, MP, Honorable Speaker, Bangladesh Parliament, to give her brief statements.
It is indeed a great pleasure and very special privilege for me to join this session, Reframing South Asian Regional Cooperation in the New Context, National and Global Dimensions. I thank CPD for organizing this event and also giving me an opportunity to come and share some thoughts with you. We have here with us today the special guest, Honorable Planning Minister, Mr. M.A. Mannan, MP, Chair of the session, Founding Chairman of CPD, Professor Rahman Subhan, guests and resource persons, experts, governors and former governors from the region, distinguished participants, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good morning, Shubho Shakal. It is an honor to join you today at the 14th South Asia Economic Summit, and which has been organized to discuss regional cooperation and development in South Asia. Center for Policy Dialogue, CPD, is hosting the SAES 14 jointly with Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka, Colombo, Sri Lanka, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, New Delhi, India, South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Kathmandu, Nepal, and Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Islamabad, Pakistan. The previous SAES events have put forward various recommendations pertaining to appropriate management of economic resources, accelerated reduction of poverty, and inclusive growth in South Asia. They have also discussed issues concerning trade and business promotion, investment and connectivity, regional harmony and security, and pathways to address the adverse impacts of climate change. All these continue to be extremely significant issues and deserve continuous attention in both national and regional settings. The past SAES events have also centered their discussions around emerging and emergent issues such as the global financial crisis, recovery from the crisis, sustainable development agenda, and the fourth industrial revolution. The last conference was in 2016, and this is 2023. So a considerable length of time has gone by, and in the midst we have faced the pandemic of COVID-19, which has also impacted us in many different ways. Similar to the rest of the world, the South Asian countries are continuing their battle to recover from the adverse impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. The war in Ukraine and subsequent global economic shocks are also having multidimensional impacts on South Asian countries. The conflict in Palestine is likely to exacerbate the situation. In this backdrop, the theme of the summit, reframing South Asian regional cooperation in the new context, national and global dimension, is very appropriate and relevant, not only in the context of Bangladesh, but also in the broader canvas of South Asia. As the region is moving forward with the common goals of eliminating poverty, ensuring decent employment opportunity, reducing inequality, achieving climate resilience, and enhancing participatory governance, the need to generate knowledge and evidence and share ideas cannot be overstated. Given this context, the SAES 14 can provide an excellent platform to discuss these issues by bringing together some of the brightest minds and key players from South Asia and beyond. It is very encouraging to note that the broad themes of SAES 14 relate to the deepening of South Asian cooperation and regional integration while taking cognizance of the new realities, both national and global. In the course of SAES 14 deliberation, discussions will be held on concrete measures with regard to how South Asian countries could cooperate in order to stimulate economic development, deepen cooperation in energy, public health, labor market management, develop value chains, and address climate change-induced vulnerabilities. The critical issue of empowering the women of the region and ensuring gender equality will also be discussed. It can be hoped that the discussions and deliberations will engender solutions from which policymakers can take guidance. Recommendations emerging from SAES 14 will help them to take concrete policy initiatives and practical steps towards the sustainable development of South Asia, ultimately benefiting the vast population of our region. We already have different frameworks. The Sustainable Development Goal Framework, to which there is a global commitment to be achieved by 2030, is now coming quite close. But there is also the data that about $4 trillion gap or dearth is there to meet the requirements of fulfilling Sustainable Development Goals. So a lot of thoughts are being put into how this gap of resource can be mobilized and how the countries can, within the framework of their own national budget and within mobilizing their own domestic resources, come up with some better innovative policies to address this gap. and how to draw the private sector also in financing SDGs, because private sectors are generally profit-driven. But in order for us to build back better and greener, which is the pledge of post-COVID-19, we need to embrace the corporate sectors and private sectors also to have more green investment and not only be profit-driven. As the South Asian region increasingly takes an onward-looking approach to benefit from the increasing global flows of capital and trade, untapped potential to exploit intra-regional economic cooperation persists. In this backdrop, it is high time to take more effective steps and coordinated efforts to the initiation of a more dynamic South Asia. It is hoped that SAES 14 will continue the excellent track record of past SAES events and prove to be an important platform to help us share our best practices for delivering best results towards the development of our countries. We also have the BIMSTEC and the BBIN. These are also some other frameworks for cooperation, and we need to explore these also. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to address the improvements Bangladesh has made in the realm of inequality of opportunity and intergenerational mobility. Bangladesh has experienced significant progress in these areas, especially in terms of access to education and health service. Primary education of girls, their access is now 98%. Our children have a better chance of overcoming the disadvantages of their parents' socioeconomic status, thanks to our concerted efforts in developing an inclusive society. This progress has been possible due to effective use of findings from research in shaping our policies and interventions, ensuring that our actions are grounded in data-driven insights. A robust demographic dividend, strongly ready-made garments exports, resilient remittance inflows, and stable macroeconomic conditions have supported rapid economic growth over the past 2 decades. Bangladesh tells a remarkable story of poverty reduction from 40% to 18%. When compared to other South Asian countries, Bangladesh has made substantial progress in addressing gender inequality. Father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, started the process of uplifting the women's status by establishing equal rights of women in the Constitution in Article 28. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has undertaken various steps to ensure women and children development in Bangladesh. Nation's improvement in the Gender Development Index and Gender Inequality Index have outpaced many nations due to initiatives like stipend program for girls, women's skill development programs, women's ICT training programs, Her Power Project, the National Women Development Policy, and also addressing the poverty of women through the social safety net protection. We are striving to build a future where men and women can realize their full potential unhampered by gender discrimination. The overall macroeconomic situation in the country was maintained after the post-COVID-19 pandemic, and also many efforts have been put in place to deal with the post-COVID situation. After successfully implementing the pledge to build a digital Bangladesh, the country is now moving forward with the vision of transforming itself into a smart nation. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is working towards implementation of SDGs by 2030 and building a smart Bangladesh by 2041. Smart Bangladesh is all about establishing an equitable nation, equal rights, equal opportunities, and no marginalized groups. A cost-effective, sustainable, intelligent, knowledge-based, innovative smart Bangladesh will be built on the 4 main foundations of smart citizens, smart economy, smart government, and smart society. Bangladesh's economic development will flourish besides attaining the cherished goal of building smart Bangladesh through generation of new, more entrepreneurs along with their vibrant activities. I wish the 14th South Asia Economic Summit titled Reframing South Asia Regional Cooperation in New Contexts, National and Global Dimension a success. I thank the organizers for arranging this event in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and also for the opportunity to be here and share my thoughts with the distinguished participants. Thank you all for your kind attention. Joy Bangla, may Bangladesh live forever.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Dear guests, I would now like to invite the founding chairman of Center for Policy Dialogue, Professor Rehman Soban, for the concluding remarks.
Honorable Speaker, Planning Minister, distinguished fellow partners on the table, my SAES partners, friends. It is a great pleasure and honor, both personally and on behalf of my institution, to welcome you here, not just to attend the 14th SAES, but to join us in celebrating the 30th anniversary of CPD. CPD began its life in November of 1993. This event, the 14th SAES, is therefore, you may say, a landmark event for us to launch the 30th anniversary celebrations for CPD, which will go on over the course of the year, next year, because the main activities of CPD then began in 1994. The fact that we should be drawing on the 14th SAES as our launching off moment is not without significance to the nature of the CPD project. CPD itself was founded on the premise that the major problems of society, and beyond that, of the region and then globally, need to be addressed through a process of collective action between state and civil society. And that rather than address these problems in a framework of confrontation, it should be addressed through a much more civilized process of reasoning and discussion. And through this process, it was possible then for us to take on very contentious issues which prevailed at the official level and at the regional level, where discussions were periodically interrupted by various developments in the political arena. The South Asian initiatives of CPD, in fact, took place at a time where the idea of South Asian cooperation through SAARC was at its early stages, and the progression was not very even. The idea of bringing together institutions of civil society to address these, to provide creative inputs, to create a fora where ideas could be discussed, and these could then be contributed to the official summits, was a very important component of what we set out to do. So today, it is very important that we have managed to sustain this process over 15 years into its 14th summit, and that we still continue to be here whilst the institution which held South Asia together, the institution of SAARC, is itself languishing. Much has changed in South Asia over these years. SAARC itself came into existence in 1985. But SAARC itself was preceded by a variety of civil society initiatives identifying the possibilities of cooperation. This essentially suggested that, interestingly enough, the prime movers for the idea of creating a South Asian community were not the governments of South Asia, but really the citizens of South Asia acting together through civil society organizations. This is, I think, a very important factor which all of you should keep in mind. Whilst the vicissitudes of relations between the states of South Asia have created both opportunities as well as setbacks to the process of cooperation, South Asian civil society has remained active. But whatever activity has gone on within the framework of the South Asian civil society has to be contextualized in what has been happening in the wider world of the states of South Asia, the functioning of the economy and their relationship to the global economy. Much has changed in South Asia itself since the founding of SAARC. I think we have already been introduced to the remarkable developments by Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi. This has been pointed out to us by our planning minister. Some suggestions of this have been offered to us in the presentation by Dr. Ishrat Hussain. And all these suggest that the world which used to condition our thinking at the level of civil society 30 years ago is not the same. Very remarkable developments have taken place. If you simply look at the booklet we have circulated from CPD to all the participants, giving you some of the data covering the changes in South Asia, such numbers as GDP growth, macroeconomic management, poverty reduction, human development have gone through transformative changes. And these changes, if you look at it in a much wider context, I had the opportunity to look at a recent, at a paper by Professor Paul Streeton, looking at the Myrdal publication of South Asian drama. And if you relate this then to the recent publication by Professor Deepak Nair, revisiting the Asian drama, you will see then how many of the assumptions which informed the original Myrdal work, which were of a highly pessimistic nature, have in fact been belied in South Asia, and within its context of the wider Asian region, has in fact emerged as one of the leaders of the changes in the global economy. So this, I think, is a contextual factor which we all have to take into account. The world has also not stood still in this particular period. We have got a special session addressing the geostrategic changes and how they have impacted on South Asia and South Asian cooperation. The very architecture within which we interface with each other has been changing, whilst South Asian institutional cooperation has been virtually at a standstill. other relationships have emerged, both at the sub-regional level and at the wider Asian level, in which we interact with each other. Our bilateral exchanges have also moved forward. Many of the developments which were referred to by the planning minister at the bilateral level, which have changed the infrastructure and logistics which govern relationships between India and Bangladesh, have been of transformative nature. Much of the benefits still remain to come in the next few years, but when they do come, they will have very important consequences for the way in which we relate to each other. However, having made these points, the point which emerges from this is that whatever significant transformations have taken place in individual South Asian countries, and whatever changes are in fact driving our relationship to the global economy, very little of this originates within the South Asian community. Most of it originates within individual South Asian countries and how they relate to each other. Where we talk about South Asia and the progress which has been made, including in trade enhancement, most of these are registered at the bilateral level rather than at the South Asian or multilateral level. And this, I think, is a matter of great significance when we are, in fact, addressing this in a conference which is reframing regional cooperation in the new context, because we have to address this problem in its wider regional context. And in these circumstances, if the major changes which are taking place are driven by our own internal dynamics in individual countries, how we are then relating to the changes in the global system, and how this is affecting our participation in different regional, sub-regional, plurilateral exchanges, become very central. I mean, when Bangladesh, for example, is looking to its future, it will be looking to a future where it is graduated out of the ghetto of the LDCs, but it will be seeking arrangements to influence the way in which it moves in that world with partners in the European Union. Our interactions at the South Asian level to address this issue have really not been of any significance at all. In fact, one of the very important concessions which were extracted by Bangladesh through the framework of South Asian cooperation related to the duty-free access accorded to us by the government of India in the early part of the century. But the significant part of it is that the concessions which were granted to us and also the removal of the non-trade barriers were all, if I'm not mistaken, extended to us under the framework of being an LDC. So what will happen to Bangladesh when you graduate from that? It will mean that you will have to not just be renegotiating your relationships with the European Union, we will have to be renegotiating our relationships with our big neighbor India itself. Now, these were all issues which should actually have been discussed in the earlier framework and assumptions which guided the emergence of the SAARC community within the framework of South Asia, but this did not actually happen. Now, let me therefore point out to you that in this forthcoming 14th summit that we have over here, we should keep in mind that we are still talking about South Asia as a region, and we are still talking about ways in which we interact together. We are doing this at a time where South Asia as a region is virtually inactive, and We therefore have to recognize that as members of South Asian civil society, we have an added responsibility of keeping the concept and the emerging and evolving agendas for cooperation alive. This is a very significant responsibility on our part. Now, in order to do so, I will give some suggestions for SAES itself, and I will conclude my remarks over there. I was going through some of the documentation which was prepared at the end of a number of earlier SAES conferences. SAES itself was established to bring together the wider stakeholders in South Asian cooperation, ranging from governments, the political players, the business community, civil society. All these entities were supposed to come together to identify a range of areas where we could cooperate together. Now here, if you look at the agendas which were put on the table as far back as 2008, when the first SAES, which was pioneered then by the late Saman Kalegama, who we all recognize and miss deeply as a person who had a passion for the idea of constructing a South Asian community. How strongly this passion survives amongst all of us, I would ask each of you to reflect on this both inwardly as well as collectively. But the important idea was at that time to identify a range of areas where cooperation could actually take place. Now, if you look at these successive agendas, which in fact have guided the discussions of SAES over the years, you will find, in comparing it with our current agenda, that a range of issues which have been identified, particularly, you may say, in the different sessions, have been on the table for a very long time. If you look at the issue of energy, if you look at the issue of transport, if you look at the issues of labor, if you look at the issues of climate change, if you look at the issues of macroeconomic cooperation in the areas of macroeconomy, all these are on the table before you in the various parallel sessions which take place. Now, all of these have been part of the SAES agenda for a very long time. Now, what unfortunately is missing is any memory of this process. If you want to get a memory of this discourse, which began 15 years ago, you will have to dig up 14 volumes of reports which have taken place. How many of you have even got 2 or 3 volumes on your shelves? I am not sure. And how many will bother to actually look at them? Again, I am uncertain. But what you really need to do as a community is to recreate a memory. And this memory has to again be done in a very organized and institutionalized way. The organization of SAES, which really is built around 5 institutions, which each act together only on the occasion when they are hosting a SAES event. Yes, it's all right. When we in fact come together, does not really enable us to recreate a memory. So what I would identify as a prospective agenda for SAES is that we should either establish an institution. I could perhaps suggest to Sachin that the institution which he co-hosts, the South Asia Center for Economic Cooperation, may in fact be an appropriate partner institution in that. which would then be entrusted for next SAES meeting to go through all the issues which were itemized beginning from the first SAES, and to then see what issues have changed, what progress has been registered in each of these areas, how the conversation has changed, how the agendas have changed, and where we stand together, so that the next SAES would then be premised on a memory of the discourse for cooperation in South Asia, take cognizance of what has happened in the real world, and would then lay down the issues which remain as relevant to the concerns of civil society in South Asia. This would be a major and important challenge, but it would need some institutional engineering for such an activity to take place. And whilst I'm suggesting that this is a responsibility which may be taken up by RIS, because they are already hosting the South Asia Center for Policy Studies, which had its creation and foundation at the Center for Policy Dialogue, and which was at one stage the relevant institution which attempted to address the problems of the region, identify opportunities for cooperation, and then perform an advocacy role in really taking these agendas forward, and not just putting it on the table before the policymakers of South Asia, but also before the people and citizens of South Asia. Let me conclude then by saying that at the end of the day, when we take into account why we are assembled over here, we are assembled over here as citizens of South Asia. Our assembly is premised on the notion that there is a South Asian community. I am encouraged here to take into account remarks made at the 13th summit hosted by RIS last year by Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Minister of State for External Affairs, when she observed, "So when I look at any of the countries in my neighborhood, be it Nepal, be it anybody else," my suspicion would be that she may have meant Pakistan, "these are my friends. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh," and this is the operative point, "these are my kith and kin. India and the region has been connected through the monsoon winds." So essentially, South Asian cooperation is not a set of statistical tables in which you identify interregional trade or interregional investment or the individual measurements of GDP growth and poverty. South Asia is a civilizational concept inherited in our shared history and geography, and from a memory that once upon a time, as the post-colonial era was being born, we were the most integrated region across the world, more integrated even than Europe at that time. We have dismantled this connectivity and this integration, and it is the task of civil society to then take the lead in attempting to reconstruct the South Asia which we have in fact observed in its disintegration. The opportunities are now much greater because we have all advanced very considerably, our ideas have matured, we have learned a great deal from our mistakes. But we should keep in mind that global events continue to move ahead of us, and if the whole idea of a South Asian community is to be regenerated, then civil society should not just see itself as an entity which periodically comes together in a series of seminars, but is willing to come together, institutionally interact, and to play a much more proactive role in tracking the agendas across the 21st century, and to project before a much wider audience, beginning with the state, but reaching out to the people beyond, that South Asia is a community and that our future lies in building a collective identity for this region. Thank you, and I hope that the discussions which go ahead will be providing a variety of ideas to address this, and that you can at the end give some thought to the suggestion I gave for creating an institutional memory for the SAES dialogue processes. I again wish to compliment all of you for joining me and my colleagues in initiating this celebration of CPD's 30th anniversary. We have remained committed to the idea of South Asia, both as individuals. My own association with South Asia predates CPD. In fact, I have circulated a paper giving my own odyssey towards the idea of a South Asian community, which goes back at least 40 years. But beyond that, we as an institution have been engaged in this idea, and we look forward to continue this journey, but with our friends here serving as our partners. And I hope then that there will be considerable institutional and intellectual value added from the outcomes of our deliberations over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rehman Soban. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the inaugural session of the 14th South Asian Economic Summit. Since we are running a bit late, we will begin the next session in this ballroom right away. So I would kindly request everyone to take your tea and coffee and come inside to join the plenary session 1, State of Regional Cooperation in South Asia, Revisiting Group of Eminent Persons Report, New Context, Challenges and Opportunities. Thank you all.